Yeah, my dad is Phil Oliver, and he used to live locally until he couldn't live independently. He'd been living independently until about April of 2020, and then after a series of hospital stays, he had to come to Lambwood Heights then. Well, actually, it's my brother Chris who also lives locally, and he had seen, I think, the building being done and so on, and he'd seen the signage, and he had a look around. We were looking at the time for care homes, and then Chris suggested we came and had a chat. We met with you, Nicola, and it was a very impressive tour. Well, obviously, when someone is moving into a care home, no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to live at home, of course. My brother and I had been looking after my father for some time, actually, in between hospital stays, and it was very clear that we couldn't manage anymore. Both we couldn't manage physically, and actually we weren't doing a great job for my dad either. So it was quite difficult for us. He'd had quite a difficult stay in hospital, and so we had then arranged for him to come and stay here. And he came out of the hospital and he was in pretty bad shape. And in fact, I think the person at the time who accepted him when he was admitted said, I think he might be a bit too difficult for us. Well, within days, he was walking on a frame, having an appetite, chatting away, moaning as usual, all those great things. And it was like a complete change. So it was very easy it was a very easy process for something that isn't really very easy, if you follow my drift. Well, of course, it's a new experience for us, like so much of this. And so when people say, what do you need? You can't answer, because I don't know. So what we found with Lambwood Heights is that the great thing about Lambwood Heights is that though it's a care home, it does feel like family. So your ethos of trying to have a family relationship does feel like that. It feels like that as family too, actually, not just for my dad. So in terms of having someone in the care home, of course, as I say, it isn't easy. But as my dad's condition has changed, as you know, sadly, he's now coming to the end of his days, there have been changes, and they've happened very easily, often in consultation with us. So in that sense, it's been a very easy journey. I think the thing that probably is the most important thing to me, at least, is that when I go home at night, I don't worry that he's not going to be cared for, whereas I would in some other care homes. Well, I think in these unprecedented COVID times, I think Lambwood Heights have done a brilliant job. I think you've had one outbreak or maybe two outbreaks that have been managed brilliantly. I think the balance between protecting the people that live in Lambwood Heights from COVID whilst maintaining access has been fantastic. So I would say that in terms of safety from COVID, it's been great. But generally speaking, I see that my father is, when he can't get out of bed and he needs to get into a chair or whatever, he's been handled very well. And that transition, as he's become weaker, you can see the levels of care have changed, and he's always been handled very well. Well, first thing I would say is it's absolutely natural to feel concerned about someone who you love, who you've known as an independent person, having to live in a residential setting that they probably wouldn't choose if they had a different choice. What I would say is, don't bottle it up. Tell whoever you're dealing with what your concerns are, and tell them as much as you can about your loved one. Because the great thing about Oakland, or certainly in Lambwood Heights, and I'm sure this is true of Oakland more generally, is that the services are really personalised. They are person-centred. It's a pretty terrible expression often used in the National Health Service, but it does mean something here. And so I think the more of a dialogue there is, and the more confident you will feel. I've seen people since my dad's been here, when I've come into reception sometimes to see him, people bringing in a relative, and they look a bit like a parent on taking their kids to school for the first day. And I always say to them, don't worry, it'll be great, because they're lovely here. The people are lovely, they're highly competent, They show great degree of care, and they show compassion for families. So I would say be concerned, because that's natural, but be reassured by Lambwood Heights or anywhere else in Oakland. Well, actually, I think it's its ethos and its values, and what you get is that real feel for living the ethos that you have of, live, love and be loved. I might have got it the wrong way around, but I know what your ethos is. And your values seem to me to be incredibly pragmatic, although quite ambitious. And they contrast, I think, with other organisations who tend to have, catchy acronyms and things. So I would say that what sets Lambwood apart and Oakland apart is that ethos and the values and the vision you have. But more importantly, the way you mobilise that with everybody in your organisation from the top to the bottom. There is a golden thread that runs through, and I think that is very hard to imitate and compete against, actually.